Star Wars has a lot of great ships in it, and not a lot of bad ones. Let's see which ones are the cream of the crop and which are the chaff. I'm Joey from Radio Free Coruscant, and these are the best and worst ships introduced in each Star Wars movie. A New Hope. It's really hard to decide on both the best and worst ship from A New Hope because all of the ships in it are peak. I don't think there is a single thing in this movie that isn't a science fiction icon. It's impossible to choose which is the best, and even harder to find a bad one. Arguably, I would say that the X-Wing is the best ship in the film, though its competition is very steep. As for the worst ship in A New Hope, we have to get really into the weeds with an obscure background ship pull. Of these, the A1 Deluxe Floater is my least favorite. Empire Strikes Back. There are really no bad ships in this movie either, which will also be the case for the next couple as well. I think the best ship introduced in Empire is without a doubt Boba Fett's Slave One, and fortunately, the unequivocal worst ship in the movie is the Storm 4 twin-pod cloud car. It's not bad by any means, there's nothing wrong with it, it's just easily the least cool ship introduced in a movie full of far better ones. Return of the Jedi. Without a doubt, the best ship introduced in Return of the Jedi is the Lambda-class shuttle, though as usual its competition is very strong with Home One and Jabba's sail barge. And while most of the ships in Star Wars 6 are very good, one stands out amongst the rest as being a little bit boring: the Tector-class Star Destroyer. This is essentially just a standard ISD without a ventral hangar bay and with more armor over the reactor bulb. I don't really know why they made this instead of just using an ISD for this scene. The Phantom Menace. Moving on to the prequel trilogy, we come to the last Star Wars film without any truly bad ships in it. Nearly every ship in it is as iconic as those of the original trilogy, and it is the source of some of my favorite ships in all of Star Wars. Now, can I really justify calling the Gozanti Cruiser the best ship in The Phantom Menace? No. Am I going to anyway? Also no, but I had you for a second, didn't I? No, instead I think the Naboo N1 Starfighter deserves that honor. It is far and away the most iconic starfighter outside of the original trilogy, and its absolutely beautiful design really sold this movie as taking place a long time before those films. As far as the worst ship in the movie goes, it doesn't really have any bad ones, but generally speaking the least good one is the Gungan Tri-Bubble Bongo submarine. I like the look of Gungan technology in general, but this particular machine just doesn't seem very safe to me. Traveling through a water planet's core in a submersible with giant force field windows is a recipe for disaster. As nearly demonstrated in the film, one power fluctuation in its generators, and you get atomized by the overwhelming weight of an entire planet's worth of water. It would be OceanGate times a million, instant conversion from the realm of biology to the realm of particle physics. It's no more scientifically nonsensical than any other piece of Star Wars technology, but it just seems like an unjustifiably dangerous design. Attack of the Clones. For the best ship in Attack of the Clones, it is a tough choice between the H-type Nubian yacht, the Naboo Royal Cruiser, and the LAAT. I think the LAT is by far the most iconic and influential of the three, leaving it as the best ship in Episode 2. And for the worst ship, I can think of no better example than the Commerce Guild's Diamond-class cruiser. This featureless gray half-circle is barely visible in the film, docked on Geonosis, and it's so boring that it wins the worst ship in the movie with no contest. Revenge of the Sith. Revenge of the Sith is easy. I think few would argue that the Venator is the best new ship in the film, and even those that prefer something like the ARC-170 or the Munificent will at least get it. The worst ship in the movie is a little tougher to choose, but there's really only two options. The CR-70 Corvette was my first thought, as it wasn't even meant to be a new ship, but was instead such a bad recreation of an existing one that it got retconned to being a new design instead. However, the new design is really good, so I think we have to go with the Commerce Guild Recusant-class light destroyer instead. It's so lumpy yet spindly at the same time, it's so inconsistent in size that some appearances seem to be over double the size of others, and it just generally doesn't look very good. The Commerce Guild is clearly not concerned with looks. There are elements of it that I like, such as how the bow looks like an alternate version of the Munificent, but unfortunately that just makes me wish it was. Rogue One. Before we proceed to the sequel trilogy, let's knock out the standalone movies. Rogue One's best new ship is obviously the U-Wing. I don't think many will disagree with that, though the handful of other new ships in the movie are all worthwhile contenders. And the worst one has to be the AT-ACT. It looks really cool with the orange cargo module, but the original AT-AT only makes sense due to its use as a terror weapon. There is absolutely no reason a heavily fortified research base should be using even those as cargo transports, let alone a new version scaled up to be 50% larger. This seems to me to be the worst possible vehicle to use as a ground cargo hauler. Solo: A Star Wars Story. Solo didn't really introduce that many new ships in the grand scheme of things. Of these, the best one is probably the Y-45 Armored Transport Hauler, and the worst is the TIE Brute. I'm not sure if that one technically counts, as it was actually created for the Force Awakens but wasn't used in it, and apparently made its way into some Star Wars mobile game before appearing in Solo. But I think most fans would consider it to be from Solo anyway. It's not really all that bad, but its asymmetry looks really stupid for a TIE fighter, and there are already a million different heavy TIE fighters they could have chosen to lead the squadron. We didn't need one more. There's a reason it was left behind on the Force Awakens cutting room floor. The Clone Wars. I bet you thought I would forget about the Clone Wars movie, didn't you? Unless you forgot about it yourself, of course. Several classic Clone Wars ships were created for this movie, and I think the best of these was the new class attack shuttle, though the Pelta and G9 Rigger are close contenders too. The worst ship is of course the Trident-class assault ship, a very strange mechanical squid that is also a spacecraft. It's not a bad ship, just a very weird one, and the worst one added in the Clone Wars movie. The Force Awakens. Moving on to the sequel trilogy, we have a lot of ships to choose from for The Force Awakens. It's tempting to say the T-70 X-Wing is the best one, as it is a fantastic modernization of one of the best sci-fi ships of all time. However, I'm not really sure I feel like declaring an X-Wing to be the best ship of two movies, so I'm going to go with the Upsilon-class command shuttle instead. This ship is honestly one of the best villain ships in all of Star Wars, and makes for a fantastic successor to the Lambda shuttle without trying to copy it too closely. And for the worst ship in The Force Awakens, I can think of no better choice than the Resistance Transport. Princess Leia graces the big screen for the first time in nearly 40 years, and what does she show up in? A shipping container welded to a B-Wing. Genuinely unbelievable. The ship is so bad it's been around for over a decade, and it doesn't even have a real name. The Last Jedi. For Episode 8's best ship, it's very tempting to say the U-55 Orbital Load Lifter, as it's one of my favorites, but I think the actual best is the Libertine. This luxury yacht is one of the sleekest in the franchise, and it's kind of insane that it hasn't appeared anywhere other than this movie and the background of a single scene in Andor. For the worst ship in the film, I know many people would suggest the Resistance Bomber, but I disagree on that. While they were destroyed quite quickly, that was because the Resistance was using them wrong, because that scene was meant to show how desperate and out of depth the characters were. And despite that, the bombers still completed their mission. No, the real worst ship in The Last Jedi was the Free Virgilia-class bunker buster, one of the Resistance's 4 capital ships. Like the others, this was a play on one of the classic Rebel ships, namely the CR-90, but it completely falls flat in a way that none of the others do. The Nebulon C and the Raddus are pretty cool, and the Vakbaor-class cargo frigate is awesome, but the Free Virgilia is just an awkward combination of the Pelta and CR-90, with a worse engine layout than either, and a huge, fragile, and ugly hammerhead section whose tips are only connected by these tiny thin pylons that would surely bend under any acceleration or maneuvering. Not to mention, this ship's presence makes the Resistance's Pyrrhic victory over D'Qar look even worse. Supposedly, this ship is a bunker buster armed with 3 enormous plasma bombs. So why, then, did the Resistance not deploy this to destroy the Dreadnought? That had seemingly no weapons on its topside to shoot it down. Just send this over and save the bombers for another day. Of course, the designers of this ship and the writers of the movie almost certainly didn't intend for these pods to be bombs. That was just a bit of lore created for the Incredible Cross-Sections book that was probably written before the movie would be released to give the ship context. But still, from its looks to its lore, the Free Virgillia Bunker Buster is absolutely the worst ship in The Last Jedi. The Rise of Skywalker. And finally, we come to what is currently the most recent Star Wars film. To avoid ending on a sour note, we'll cover the worst ship in the movie first this time, which I think is universally agreed to be the Zyston-class Star Destroyer. I cannot for the life of me imagine what would compel Lucasfilm to make the final boss Star Destroyer be 100% identical to the ISD, save for a single super laser cannon instead of the hangar and a 50% size increase. It's the laziest thing I've ever seen. Not to mention, there are hundreds of them, and yet they are all controlled by a single navigation beacon that only needs to tell them to go up, and they crash if they lose the connection to it? Okay. And to make matters worse, they can all be destroyed by a few starfighters targeting the giant glowing red cannon on the bottom? Remind me again why we need to be concerned about these ships. They're like if a nuclear missile could be shot down by a bow and arrow. This vulnerability also robs us of a great capital ship battle, which we have not gotten to see since Revenge of the Sith. We have a fleet of hundreds of turbo star destroyers, and another fleet of thousands of civilian capital ships of all shapes and sizes, and they both kind of just hang there in midair watching the starfighters do all the work instead. If the ship's design were good, I could excuse the lame battle, and if the battle were good, I could excuse the lame design, but I cannot forgive both, landing the Zyston at the unenviable position of the worst ship in The Rise of Skywalker. As for the best ship in the film, I do not think longtime viewers will be surprised to hear I think it is the WTK-85A Interstellar Transport. Technically, this is from The Force Awakens 2, but it only appears very briefly in one flashback scene and then got completely redesigned for The Rise of Skywalker. This little ship is honestly one of the best civilian ships in all of Star Wars, and no matter what you think of The Rise of Skywalker, you've got to give it props for producing such a nice, versatile ship. And those were my votes for the best and worst ships introduced in each Star Wars movie. This ended up being way longer than I expected it to be, but I suppose with 12 movies to cover and 2 ships to talk about from each, I don't know why I thought it would be short. I would have had to skip the explanations for that, I guess, but then there would be no point in doing it at all. So, let me know what you think of this list, and if you agree or disagree with any of my takes. There were a lot of movies with a lot of possible right answers, so I'm sure others will have a different opinion on many of these. Just remember that, like I said a couple times, a ship being the worst in its movie doesn't mean it's a bad ship in general, or even that I don't like it. It just happens to be the least good ship introduced in a large batch of very good ships, as was the case for a lot of these. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. RFC, out.